The wind cut through the empty streets like a knife. Elena pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders, but it did almost nothing against the freezing cold. Snow had been falling for hours now, covering everything in a thick white blanket. Her fingers felt numb inside her worn gloves, the kind with holes at the fingertips that her mother kept saying she'd fix but never had time to. She was 14 years old and should have been home by now. Should have been sitting at the small kitchen table, doing homework with a cup of hot tea warming her hands. But instead she was walking through the worst snowstorm the city had seen in years, with at least another mile to go before she'd reach anywhere familiar. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was her mother again. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. The car won't start. It's completely dead. I'm trying to find someone who can help. But everyone's already gone home because of the weather. Can you wait somewhere warm? Please don't try to walk all the way home." Elena looked around at the dark, empty street. She had already been walking for over an hour, ever since her after-school tutoring session ended. The library where she usually waited had closed early because of the storm. The small cafe down the street had its lights off. Everything was shutting down, everyone rushing home before the weather got worse. "It's okay, Mom," she texted back, her fingers barely able to move. "I'll find somewhere. Don't worry about me," but she was worried. Her toes had stopped hurting from the cold about 20 minutes ago, which she knew wasn't a good sign. Her boots had a crack in the left one, and her sock was completely soaked through. Each step made a soft squishing sound that nobody could hear over the howling wind. She kept walking, her backpack heavy on her shoulders. Inside were her school books, her math homework that was due tomorrow, and the sheet music she'd printed out last week at the library. Sheet music for a piece she'd been dreaming about playing for months, a piece that was probably too difficult for someone at her level, but she didn't care. She loved a challenge. That's when she saw it. Up ahead, through the swirling snow, warm golden light spilled out from tall windows. The concert hall. She'd walked past it 100 times, always slowing down to look at the posters advertising upcoming performances. Classical music concerts, piano recitals, orchestras from around the world. It was the kind of place that felt like a different universe from her own life. Elena had never been inside. Tickets were expensive, the kind of expensive that her family couldn't even dream about. Her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep them in their small apartment. Her father had left when she was 7, and they hadn't heard from him since. There was no money for concerts, for fancy clothes, for the kinds of things that people who went to places like this probably took for granted. But right now, Elena didn't care about any of that. She just needed to get warm. She pushed through the heavy glass doors and immediately the heat hit her face like a gentle slap. It hurt at first, that sudden change from freezing to warm, but it was the most wonderful pain she'd ever felt. She stood there for a moment, just breathing, watching the snow melt off her jacket and drip onto the polished marble floor. The lobby was beautiful. High ceilings with crystal chandeliers, walls painted in cream and gold, and thick red carpets that her wet boots were probably ruining. She felt out of place immediately, like she'd accidentally wandered into someone else's dream. "Excuse me, miss. Can I help you?" Elena turned to see a security guard walking toward her. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with kind eyes and a concerned expression. She probably looked terrible, she realized. Her hair was wet and tangled, her cheeks bright red from the cold, her clothes soaked through. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "I know I shouldn't just come in here, but the storm is really bad and my mom's car broke down and I was just wondering if maybe I could wait here for a little while. Just until she can come get me?" The guard studied her for a moment. Elena held her breath. He could easily tell her to leave, send her back out into the freezing cold. She'd seen it happen before at other nice places in the city. Poor kids weren't welcome in spaces like this, but then his expression softened. "You look half frozen to death, kid. Come on, there's a bench over there by the radiator. You can wait there and warm up." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you so much. I promise I won't cause any trouble. I'll just sit quietly." "It's no problem," he said. "Can't send anyone out in that weather. Just make sure you check in with me before you leave, all right? I want to make sure you get home safe." Elena nodded gratefully and made her way to the bench he'd pointed at. She sat down carefully, not wanting to get the velvet cushion too wet. The radiator next to her was putting out blessed heat, and she held her hands up to it, slowly feeling returning to her frozen fingers. As sensation came back, so did her awareness of her surroundings. The lobby was quiet except for the distant sound of the wind outside. There were posters on the walls showing famous musicians, upcoming events, photos of past performances. She read them all, imagining what it would be like to actually attend a concert here, to sit in one of those plush seats and listen to a real orchestra, not just recordings on her phone with one broken earbud. And then she saw it. In the corner of the lobby, partially hidden behind a velvet rope with a "Do Not Touch" sign, was a grand piano. It was the most beautiful instrument she'd ever seen. Black and glossy, reflecting the chandelier light like a mirror. The lid was closed, but she could see the keys, white and black, perfectly aligned and waiting. Elena's heart started beating faster. She'd been playing piano for 6 years now, ever since her elementary school music teacher had noticed her humming melodies and asked if she wanted to learn. The school had an old upright piano in the music room, terribly out of tune with several broken keys. But Elena had fallen in love with it anyway. She practiced every day during lunch break and after school, staying late until the janitor came to lock up. She'd never touched a grand piano before, never even been close to one. She looked around. The guard had gone back to his desk by the door. The lobby was empty. The piano was right there, just a few steps away. She shouldn't. She knew she shouldn't. But her fingers were already tingling, and it wasn't just from the cold anymore. It was from the music she could almost hear, the notes that were trapped inside her waiting to come out. Elena stood up slowly. She walked toward the piano like it was calling to her. Each step felt significant, like she was crossing some invisible line between the life she had and the life she dreamed about. She reached the velvet rope and stopped. Her hand hovered over it. This was wrong. She was going to get in trouble. The guard would throw her out. She'd be back in the freezing cold, and this time she'd deserve it. But the piano was right there, and her fingers remembered the piece she'd been practicing. The one she knew by heart, the one she dreamed about at night. Just one piece. Just a few minutes. Then she'd go back to the bench and wait quietly like she promised. Elena stepped over the rope and sat down at the piano bench. Elena's hands trembled as they hovered over the keys. Not from the cold anymore, but from something else entirely. Fear. Excitement. A desperate kind of longing that she'd carried inside her for years. She glanced back toward the security guard's desk. He was reading something on his phone, not paying attention to her. The lobby was still empty, the storm outside keeping everyone away. It was just her and this beautiful piano, alone in this moment that felt stolen from someone else's life. Her fingers touched the keys. They were cool and smooth, so different from the chipped, yellowed keys at school. These felt perfect, professional, real. She pressed down gently on middle C, and the sound that came out made her eyes close. It was pure and clear, ringing through the empty lobby like a bell. At school, middle C sounded dull and tired, like it had given up trying to be beautiful. But this note sang. Elena took a deep breath. She knew what she wanted to play. She'd been practicing it for 3 months now, watching videos on her phone, late at night, replaying sections over and over until her mother yelled at her to go to sleep. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. It was probably too advanced for her. Her school music teacher, Mrs. Chen, had told her to focus on simpler pieces first. But Elena couldn't help it. From the first time she'd heard this piece, it had lived inside her chest, like a secret she needed to share. She positioned her hands and began to play. The first notes floated out soft and gentle, like someone whispering a story. Her left hand moved in steady patterns while her right hand sang the melody, each note connecting to the next like they were old friends meeting again. She forgot about the cold, forgot about her wet socks and her broken boots, forgot about the math homework in her backpack and the fact that she was probably going to fail tomorrow's test because she'd spent all her study time learning this piece instead. Nothing else existed except the music. Her fingers knew where to go even though her brain wasn't really thinking about it anymore. Muscle memory, Mrs. Chen called it. The kind of knowledge that lives in your bones, that comes from doing something over and over until it becomes part of you. Elena had practiced this piece on every surface she could find. On the school piano, obviously, but also on her desk at home, pressing silent keys on the wood. On her lap during bus rides, her fingers moving through the air. On the cafeteria table during lunch when no one was watching. The music grew stronger, more confident. There was a section in the middle where the melody climbed higher and higher, reaching for something beautiful and just out of reach. Elena's hands stretched across the keys, her pinky finger barely making it to that high note, but she got it. Clean and perfect. She didn't notice when tears started running down her cheeks. This was what she lived for. These moments when the world made sense, when everything ugly and difficult and unfair just disappeared, and all that was left was beauty. Pure, simple beauty that anyone could understand, no matter who they were or where they came from or how much money they had. At home, her mother worked constantly. Morning shift at the restaurant, evening shift at the convenience store, barely any time to sleep in between. Elena saw the worry lines getting deeper around her mother's eyes, saw how she rubbed her feet at night, wincing but never complaining. They lived in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment with paper-thin walls where she could hear the neighbors fighting most nights. The fridge was mostly empty except for rice and whatever leftover vegetables were about to go bad. Her school uniform had to last another year, even though it was getting too small. Her winter coat was from the donation bin at church, 3 sizes. Too big? The one she was wearing now that couldn't keep out the cold? But when Elena played piano, none of that mattered. She could be anyone. Go anywhere, feel anything. The piano didn't care that her boots had holes or that she wore the same jeans 4 days in a row, or that she'd eaten plain rice for dinner again last night. The piano only cared about the music, about what her hands could create, about the feeling she put into every note. The piece moved into its final section, the melody returning but softer now, tired but content, like someone looking back on a beautiful memory. Elena played it with all the longing in her heart, all the dreams she had that seemed impossible, all the love she had for this music that had saved her so many times when nothing else could. She held the final chord, let it ring out and fade slowly into silence. For a moment she just sat there, her hands still on the keys, breathing hard like she'd been running. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. That feeling, that incredible feeling of having played something perfectly, of having connected with the music in a way that made her feel whole, it was worth everything. Worth the risk of getting caught, worth the fear of being thrown out, worth all of it. That was beautiful. Elena's heart stopped. She spun around on the bench so fast she almost fell off. The security guard was standing a few feet away. She hadn't heard him approach. He had this strange expression on his face, something between surprise and sadness and something else she couldn't quite name. "I'm so sorry," Elena stammered, jumping up from the bench. "I know I shouldn't have touched it. I know the sign says not to. I'm sorry, I'll leave right now. I promise I won't." "Hold on," he said, holding up his hand. "I'm not mad, kid. That was really something. Where'd you learn to play like that?" Elena felt her face burning. She couldn't tell if it was embarrassment or fear or maybe both. "At school. We have a piano in the music room. I practice there." "Your school must have a pretty good music program." She almost laughed. "Not really. The piano's old and half the keys stick. But it's all we have." The guard nodded slowly. "And you learned that whole piece on a broken piano?" "I watch videos online. There are free tutorials. And Mrs. Chen, my music teacher, she helps sometimes, but mostly I practice a lot. I can tell." He walked closer, looking at the piano and then back at her. "You've got real talent, you know that?" Elena didn't know what to say. Talent felt like a luxury word, something for other people. People who went to real music schools and had parents who could afford lessons and didn't have to practice on broken instruments in empty rooms. "Can I ask you something?" the guard said. "Why'd you play just now? You knew you weren't supposed to touch it." Elena looked down at her wet boots, at the small puddle that had formed around her feet on the expensive carpet. "I don't know. I've never been close to a real grand piano before, and it was right there. And I thought maybe just this once I could know what it feels like to play something beautiful, something that actually sounds the way it's supposed to sound." The words came out small and honest, and she immediately wished she could take them back. She sounded pathetic, like some poor kid who didn't know her place. But the guard's expression got softer. "I get it, kid. I really do. He was quiet for a moment, then said, You know what? The hall is closed tonight because of the storm. Nobody's here except me, and that piano's just sitting there anyway. Elena looked up at him, not sure what he was suggesting. Play something else, he said. If you want to, I promise I won't tell anyone. Her eyes went wide. Really? Really? Consider it payment for that performance. It's been a long time since I've heard anything that beautiful. Elena felt something crack open in her chest. She sat back down at the piano, her hands shaking again, but this time with pure joy. She played another piece, and then another, and the guard sat on the bench in the lobby listening, while outside the storm raged on and the world stayed frozen and far away. Elena lost track of time. She played piece after piece, each one flowing into the next like they were all part of the same long conversation. Her fingers moved across the keys with growing confidence, no longer afraid of making mistakes. The security guard stayed on his bench listening quietly, occasionally nodding along to the music. She was in the middle of a Beethoven sonata, one of the easier ones but still challenging, when she heard a door open somewhere in the building. The sound echoed through the empty hall. She stopped playing immediately, her hands frozen over the keys. It's probably just the night janitor, the guard said. Don't worry about it, but Elena's heart was pounding. She'd been playing for almost 40 minutes. What if someone important was here? What if she got the guard in trouble for letting her stay? She started to stand up, ready to grab her backpack and leave, but then she heard footsteps. They were getting closer. Dress shoes on marble floor, the sound sharp and purposeful. Someone walking like they owned the place. Elena looked at the guard, panic rising in her throat. The footsteps stopped. Elena turned slowly toward the sound and saw a man standing at the entrance to the lobby. He was tall and thin, probably in his 60s, wearing an expensive-looking coat with snow on the shoulders. His gray hair was swept back from his face, and he had the kind of posture that made him look important, even when he was just standing still. His eyes, dark and intense, were fixed directly on her. She felt like she'd been caught stealing. I'm sorry, she said immediately, her voice coming out smaller than she meant it to. I didn't mean to disturb anyone. I was just leaving. The man didn't say anything. He just stood there staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Was he angry, confused? She couldn't tell. The silence stretched out for what felt like forever, and Elena wanted to disappear into the floor. Finally, the man spoke. His voice was deep and had an accent she couldn't quite place. Russian, maybe, or somewhere from Eastern Europe. That was Beethoven. Sonata number 8, the Pathétique. Elena nodded, not sure if she was supposed to respond. You made 3 mistakes in the second movement, he continued. The tempo was inconsistent in measures 24 through 28, and your left hand was too loud during the transition. Elena's face burned with shame. Of course she'd made mistakes. She always did. And of course this man, whoever he was, had perfect hearing and could catch every single one of them. She wanted to cry, but she forced herself to hold it together. I'm sorry, she said again. I'm still learning. I shouldn't have... But, the man interrupted, walking closer. Your interpretation was interesting. Different. You played it with more emotion than precision, which is unusual for that piece. Most students your age focus too much on getting the notes right and forget that music is supposed to make people feel something. Elena didn't know what to say to that. Was it a compliment or a criticism? She glanced at the security guard, who was watching the whole thing with raised eyebrows, looking just as confused as she felt. The man reached the piano and stood beside it, studying Elena like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. Where do you study? Study? Which conservatory? Who is your teacher? Elena felt her stomach drop. Conservatory. The word alone sounded expensive. I don't go to a conservatory. I'm in 8th grade at Lincoln Middle School. My teacher is Mrs. Chen, but she's just the regular music teacher. We only have class twice a week. The man's eyebrows went up. You learned to play like that with only 2 classes per week? I practice on my own a lot. During lunch. After school. Whenever I can. What piano do you practice on? Elena hesitated. The one at school. It's not very good. A lot of the keys stick and it's really out of tune, but it's the only one I have access to. The man was quiet for a long moment, just looking at her. Then he turned to the piano, lifted the fallboard that covered the keys, and sat down on the bench. His movements were elegant, practiced like he'd done this a million times before. "Do you know Rachmaninoff?" he asked. "A little," Elena said. "I've listened to some of his pieces, but I've never tried to play any. They're too hard for me." "Probably," the man agreed. "But let me show you something." He placed his hands on the keys and began to play. The music that came out was nothing like what Elena had been playing. It was powerful and sweeping, full of complex chords and runs that moved up and down the keyboard so fast his hands were practically a blur. The sound filled the entire lobby, reaching into every corner, making the chandeliers above them seem to vibrate with the intensity of it. Elena had never heard anyone play like this in person. Only in recordings, videos of famous pianists performing in concert halls exactly like this one. But seeing it happen right in front of her, feeling the music in her chest, watching his fingers move with impossible speed and precision, it was something else entirely. It was magic. He played for maybe 2 minutes, then stopped abruptly, his hands lifting off the keys. The silence that followed felt huge. "That is what this instrument can do in the right hands," he said, turning to look at her. "You have potential, raw talent. But talent alone is not enough. You need training, real training. You need to learn proper technique before you develop bad habits that will be impossible to break later." Elena didn't know how to respond. Everything he was saying felt true, but it also felt impossible. Real training meant money, lots of it, money her family would never have. I can't afford lessons," she said quietly. "We barely have enough for—" She stopped herself. She didn't need to tell this stranger about her family's problems. It's just not possible right now. The man studied her for another long moment. Then he stood up from the bench and reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a business card and held it out to her. Elena took it carefully. The card was thick and expensive feeling, with raised letters. It said Viktor Volkov, Artistic Director, followed by the name of the concert hall and a phone number. Her eyes went wide. The Artistic Director. That meant he was in charge of everything here. All the concerts, all the performers, all the decisions about who got to play on this stage. And she'd just been caught playing his piano without permission. "Come here tomorrow after school," he said. 4 o'clock. "Ask for me at the main desk. Don't be late." "I don't understand," Elena said. "Why would you want me to come back?" "I wasn't supposed to be playing. I broke the rules." "Yes, you did," Victor agreed. "But you also showed me something I don't see very often. Passion. Real, genuine passion for music. Do you know how many students I meet who play perfectly but feel nothing? Who can execute every note with technical precision, but can't make anyone care about what they're hearing?" He gestured to the piano. "You played on a broken instrument with no proper training, and still managed to make me stop and listen. That's not something that can be taught. Either you have it or you don't. And you have it." Elena felt tears threatening again, but for a completely different reason this time. "I'll be here," she managed to say. 4 o'clock. "I promise." Victor nodded once, then turned to leave. He made it halfway across the lobby before he stopped and looked back at her. "One more thing," he said. "What's your name?" "Elena. Elena Rodriguez." "Well, Elena Rodriguez, don't practice anything new before tomorrow. I want to hear what else you already know, and try not to freeze to death on your way home." With that, he walked out, leaving Elena standing by the piano, holding his business card like it was made of gold. The security guard let out a low whistle. "Do you know who that was, kid?" Elena nodded, still staring at the card in her hand. "He doesn't give those out to just anyone," the guard said. "I've worked here for 12 years and I've never seen him stop to listen to someone play like that. Whatever you did, you must have really impressed him." Elena's phone buzzed. Her mother saying she'd finally found a ride and was on her way. Elena sat back down on the bench by the radiator, but she couldn't feel the cold anymore. All she could feel was the weight of that business card in her hand and the sound of Viktor Volkov's words echoing in her head. Tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Her life was about to change. She could feel it. Elena barely slept that night. She kept touching the business card on her nightstand, making sure it was real, that she hadn't dreamed the whole thing. Viktor Volkov, Artistic Director. Tomorrow at 4 o'clock. When her mother had finally picked her up from the concert hall, Elena had tried to explain what happened. But the words came out jumbled and excited, and her mother looked so exhausted from her double shift that Elena wasn't sure how much she actually understood. "A man wants to see you again?" her mother had asked, worry creeping into her voice. What kind of man? Not like that, Mom. He's the director of the concert hall. He heard me play piano and he wants to talk to me about it. He gave me his card. Look. Her mother had studied the card under the car's dim interior light, then looked at Elena with an expression that was half hope, half fear. Mija, you know we can't afford fancy lessons. If he's trying to sell you something. I don't think that's what this is, Elena had said, but honestly she didn't know what it was. All she knew was that Viktor Volkov had listened to her play and hadn't thrown her out. He'd asked her to come back. That had to mean something. The next day at school dragged by like someone had slowed down time itself. Elena sat through her classes in a fog, unable to concentrate on anything. Math problems swam in front of her eyes. Her English teacher asked her a question about the book they were reading, and Elena had no idea what the answer was because she hadn't heard a single word. During lunch, she went to the music room like always, but instead of practicing, she just sat at the piano staring at the keys. What if Victor changed his mind? What if she showed up and he didn't remember her? What if this was all some kind of misunderstanding? Mrs. Chen found her there sitting motionless on the bench. Elena, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Elena told her everything. About getting stuck at the concert hall, about playing the piano, about Viktor Volkov and his business card and the appointment at 4 o'clock. Mrs. Chen's eyes got wider and wider as the story went on. Wait, Viktor Volkov? The Viktor Volkov? I guess so. Is he famous or something? Mrs. Chen laughed, but it wasn't a mean laugh. It was amazed. Elena, he's one of the most respected musicians in the country. He's trained dozens of concert pianists. People pay thousands of dollars just to audition for his program. She grabbed Elena's shoulders. This is incredible. This could change everything for you. But what if I'm not good enough? What if he was just being nice? Viktor Volkov is not known for being nice, Mrs. Chen said. He's known for being honest. If he asked you to come back, it's because he sees something in you. Don't doubt that. At 3:30, Elena practically ran out of school. She couldn't be late. She wouldn't be late. She got on the bus and watched the stops go by, each one feeling like it took an hour. When she finally got off at the concert hall stop, she still had 15 minutes to spare. She stood outside for a moment, looking up at the building. In the daylight, it looked even more impressive. The architecture was old and grand with tall columns and intricate stonework. The kind of building that had history in every brick. She took a deep breath and walked through the doors. The lobby looked different during the day. There were people everywhere. Well-dressed people carrying instrument cases, talking in small groups looking like they belonged here. Elena suddenly felt very aware of her, worn-out school uniform and her backpack with the broken zipper. She walked up to the main desk where a woman with perfect makeup and even more perfect hair sat typing on a computer. Excuse me, Elena said. I have an appointment with Mr. Volkov at 4 o'clock. The woman looked up, and Elena saw her eyes take in every detail of her appearance. There was a flash of something. Doubt, maybe? Like she couldn't quite believe that someone who looked like Elena had an appointment with Viktor Volkov. Your name? Elena Rodriguez. The woman checked her computer and her eyebrows went up slightly. He's expecting you. Take the elevator to the 3rd floor. His office is the last door on the right. Elena thanked her and headed for the elevator, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The elevator was fancy too, with mirrors and soft lighting. She caught sight of herself and winced. Her hair was messy from the wind outside. She had a stain on her shirt from lunch. She looked like exactly what she was, a poor kid who didn't belong here. The 3rd floor was quieter. Thick carpet absorbed the sound of her footsteps. She walked down the hallway, passing framed photos of famous musicians and concert posters from decades past. At the end of the hall there was a dark wooden door with a gold nameplate, Viktor Volkov. She knocked, her hand shaking. Come in. Elena opened the door and stepped into an office that looked like it belonged in a movie. Books everywhere, floor to ceiling. A grand piano in the corner. Windows overlooking the city. And behind a massive desk, Viktor Volkov, looking at her with those same intense eyes from last night. You're 2 minutes early, he said. That's good. Professional musicians are always early. Elena didn't know if she should sit down or stay standing, so she just stood there awkwardly by the door. Sit, Viktor said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. We need to talk. She sat down, clutching her backpack in her lap like a shield. Victor leaned back in his chair, studying her. I'm going to be direct with you, Elena. I don't have time for games or false modesty. I've been running this hall's youth program for 20 years. I've heard thousands of young pianists. Most of them are technically proficient. They can play the notes. They can follow the tempo. They can pass exams and win competitions. But they're boring. They play like robots, like they're checking boxes on a list. He paused and Elena held her breath. You are not boring, he continued. You have something that can't be taught. Musicality. Feeling. When you play, you're not just hitting keys. You're telling a story. That is rare. Extremely rare. Elena felt her eyes getting hot. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. Because here's the problem. You have terrible technique. Your hand position is wrong. Your posture is wrong. You're pressing the keys too hard, which will damage your fingers over time. You have potential, but if you don't get proper training soon, you'll develop habits that will limit you forever. The hope that had been building in her chest started to deflate. I know, but I can't afford— I know you can't, Victor interrupted. I'm not stupid.
I can tell from looking at you that money is tight.
So let me make you an offer. This hall runs a youth conservatory program. We take talented students and train them. Real training, private lessons, master classes, performance opportunities. It usually costs $15,000 per year. Elena felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. $15,000. That might as well be 15 million. There was no way. Absolutely no way, but Victor continued, and Elena looked up at him. We also have scholarships, full scholarships for students who show exceptional promise. I want to offer you one. The world stopped spinning. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she was hearing. You mean free? She finally managed to say. Completely free. Lessons 3 times per week. Access to our practice rooms and instruments. Performance opportunities. Everything you need to develop your talent properly. But why? You only heard me play for a few minutes. That's all I needed, Victor said. I've been doing this long enough to know real talent when I hear it. And I'll be honest with you, this is selfish on my part. Good teachers need good students. Teaching someone like you, someone who actually cares about music, is worth more than money. Elena realized she was crying. Tears were running down her face and she couldn't stop them. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. There's one condition, Victor said, and Elena's heart jumped. Of course there was a condition. There was always a catch. You have to promise me you'll work hard. Harder than you've ever worked at anything. I'm going to push you. I'm going to criticize you. I'm going to make you play the same measure 100 times until you get it right. This won't be easy. Can you handle that? Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Yes, I promise. I'll work as hard as you want me to. Victor nodded, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled. It was small, but it was real. Good, then we start next Monday. 4 o'clock. Don't be late. Elena left his office in a daze. She walked back through the lobby, got on the bus, and rode home without really seeing anything. When she got to her apartment, her mother was making dinner, and Elena just stood in the doorway and cried. Mija, what's wrong? What happened? Nothing's wrong, Mom, Elena said through her tears. Everything's right. Everything's finally right. 2 years passed like a dream, except dreams were never this hard. Victor hadn't been joking about pushing her. From that very first lesson, he tore apart everything Elena thought she knew about playing piano. Her hand position was wrong. Her wrist was too stiff. She was using too much arm and not enough fingers. She was breathing at the wrong times. Things she'd been doing for 6 years suddenly became obstacles she had to unlearn. There were days when Elena left her lessons wanting to quit. Days when Victor would make her play the same 4 measures for an entire hour, stopping her every single time, pointing out flaws she couldn't even hear. Again, he'd say. Again. 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 Until her fingers ached and her eyes burned with frustrated tears. But she never quit. Not once. She practiced until her mother had to force her to stop and eat dinner. She practiced until the building manager came knocking, asking if she could please give the neighbors a break. She practiced through holidays and weekends and late into the night, until the melodies followed her into her dreams. Slowly, things started to change. The pieces that had seemed impossible became merely difficult. The difficult ones became manageable. Her fingers learned to move independently, each one doing its own job while working together as a team. She learned to use the weight of her arm, to let gravity help instead of fighting it. She learned that playing piano wasn't about hitting keys hard. It was about understanding the exact amount of pressure needed for each note, each emotion, each moment. Victor introduced her to other students in the program, kids her age and older, all incredibly talented, all from families that could actually afford to be there. At first, Elena felt like an imposter. These kids had been training since they were 5 years old. They talked about performances in other countries, about famous teachers they'd studied with, about summer programs in Europe that cost more than Elena's mother made in a year. But when Elena played, something shifted. The other students stopped talking and listened. Really listened. Because what Elena had couldn't be bought with money or learned from expensive teachers. She played like someone who needed music to survive. Because for her, it was true. One day, about 1.5 years into the program, Victor called her into his office. "How would you feel about performing?" he asked. Elena's stomach dropped. "Performing? Like in front of people?" "That is generally what performing means, yes." He almost smiled. Almost. "We have a spring showcase every year. Students perform for an audience. I think you're ready." "I don't know if I wouldn't ask if you weren't ready," Victor interrupted. "The question is, do you want to?" Did she want to? She'd dreamed about performing on a real stage her whole life. But dreams felt safe. Actually, doing it felt terrifying. "Yes," she heard herself say. "I want to." Victor nodded. "Good. You'll play in the opening half. I'm giving you the Chopin Nocturne. The one you were playing the night we met." Elena's eyes went wide. "Really? You've earned it. You've worked harder than anyone in this program. It's time to show people what you can do." The spring showcase was held in the concert hall's main auditorium, the same building where Elena had sheltered from the storm 2 years ago. As the date got closer, Elena felt like she might throw up every single day. She practiced the nocturne until she could play it backwards in her sleep. Victor worked with her on every detail, every phrase, every emotion. "Music is a conversation," he told her during one lesson. "You're not performing at the audience. You're speaking to them, telling them something only you can say. What do you want them to feel?" Elena thought about it. "I want them to feel hope, like no matter how hard things are, there's still beauty in the world. There's still something worth holding on to." Victor looked at her for a long moment. "Then play that." The night of the showcase arrived faster than Elena was ready for. She stood backstage in a dress that the program had provided, her hands shaking, listening to the audience filing into their seats. Through the curtain, she could see the auditorium filling up. Hundreds of people. Her mother was out there somewhere, sitting next to Mrs. Chen, who had insisted on coming to support her. One of the older students, a boy named Daniel, who'd always been kind to her, noticed her shaking. "First performance?" Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Want to know a secret? Everyone's nervous. Every single time. Even professionals. The nervousness means you care. That's good." "It doesn't feel good," Elena whispered. "It will," he said. "As soon as you start playing, everything else disappears. Trust me." Elena was the third performer of the night. She waited in the wings, listening to the first 2 students play their pieces flawlessly. They were so good. So polished and perfect. How could she possibly compare? Then she heard Victor's voice announcing her name. "Our next performer is Elena Rodriguez, playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major." The applause sounded far away as Elena walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, making it hard to see the audience, which was probably a blessing. The piano waited for her in the center of the stage, the same grand piano she'd played that snowy night. They'd moved it from the lobby for the showcase. Elena sat down on the bench. Her hands found their position on the keys. And then, just like Daniel had said, everything else disappeared. She wasn't in an auditorium anymore. She was back in that lobby, freezing and alone, finding comfort in music. She was in her kitchen at home, watching her mother count coins to see if they had enough for groceries. She was on the bus to school, looking out the window and imagining a different life. She was every moment of struggle and hope and fear and determination that had brought her to this exact place. Her fingers touched the keys, and the first notes floated out into the silence. The nocturne unfolded like a story. The melody sang, soft and sweet at first, then growing stronger, more confident. Her left hand provided the foundation, steady and sure, while her right hand spoke the words only music could say. She played the difficult middle section, the one that had taken her months to master, and her fingers knew exactly where to go. She played the return of the main theme, softer now with more wisdom, like someone looking back on a journey and understanding what it all meant. And when she played the final chord, letting it ring out and fade into silence, she finally remembered to breathe. For a moment there was nothing. Just quiet. Elena sat there, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake, if everyone had hated it, if she'd just embarrassed herself in front of hundreds of people. Then the applause started, not polite scattered clapping. Real applause, loud and strong and lasting longer than she'd expected. Elena stood up and bowed, the way Victor had taught her, and when she looked out into the audience she could see people standing. A standing ovation, for her. She found her mother in the crowd, and even from the stage Elena could see that she was crying. Backstage, after the showcase ended, people kept coming up to congratulate her. Other students' parents, teachers, people she'd never met. They all said the same thing, that her performance had moved them, that she had a gift that they couldn't wait to hear her play again. Victor found her in the chaos. He didn't say much, just put a hand on her shoulder and nodded. But his eyes said everything else. Pride, satisfaction, recognition of how far she'd come. Later that night, Elena and her mother walked out of the concert hall together. It was spring now, warm and pleasant, nothing like that frozen night 2 years ago. But as they stepped outside, Elena looked back at the building, at the lobby visible through the tall windows. "What are you thinking about?" her mother asked. "That night," Elena said, "when I was stuck here in the storm, when I thought I was just a poor kid who'd never belong in a place like this." Her mother squeezed her hand. "And now? Now I know that music doesn't care where you come from. It doesn't care about your clothes or your address or how much money your family has. It only cares about what's in your heart. And if your heart is in the right place, if you're willing to work for it, then you belong anywhere music is." Her mother smiled, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of you, mija." They walked home together through the warm spring night, and Elena thought about all the practice sessions still ahead, all the pieces she still wanted to learn, all the performances waiting in her future. The journey was far from over. In many ways it was just beginning. But on that night, in that moment, Elena knew something for certain. She'd found where she belonged. Not because someone had given it to her, but because she'd earned it. One frozen night, one forbidden piano, one brave choice at a time. And somewhere in the concert hall behind them, that grand piano sat waiting in the lobby, ready for the next person who needed it. Ready for the next impossible dream.